Hello and welcome back to Basement Philosophy, or Philosophy from the Depths. And this week we'll look at the reading list for the topic on creation. So let's make a start. To ease us in, here's a little piece I wrote a few years ago on the question of why there is something rather than nothing. It's short, it's not too heavy, just looking at how a number of different thinkers have answered that question. And next up we have this article. It's useful for understanding the origins of the idea of creation from nothing. The author shows that the basic idea can be found in Jewish writings that predate Christianity, though in those writings the doctrine is not stated as explicitly as it would be later on. And he explains that the first Jewish text to favour creation from nothing in an unambiguous way was actually written in the 5th century. And this is a book. Now chapter 2 of this book is the part to read. And this chapter addresses the question of whether the doctrine of creation from nothing is grounded in the Jewish and Christian scriptures. It's a pretty involved chapter. There's a lot of lexical analysis, so a lot of analysis of the words used. But that just makes it pretty thorough. The author claims that many biblical passages do speak of creation from nothing, even if those passages actually don't put it quite as explicitly as that. And he also looks at some early Jewish and Christian thinkers who accepted the doctrine of creation from nothing. Now, next up is a book called Creation and the God of Abraham. This is an edited book. And that means it's a collection of essays written by a number of different authors and then compiled by an editor. And there are a couple of chapters that I'd recommend here. First of all is chapter 1, which explains how the doctrine of creation from nothing came to be adopted in Christianity. And I'd also recommend chapter 10, which looks at how the present state of science bears on the doctrine of creation from nothing. The author argues that the doctrine doesn't conflict with the discoveries of science, and in fact what science does is fill in some of the details of that doctrine. Now here we have another edited book, and if you fancy reading the whole thing, please do, but I'm recommending only the chapter that's entitled "What Does Physical Cosmology Say About Creation from Nothing?" And this chapter looks, as the title suggests, at what modern cosmology says about creation from nothing. The author argues that cosmology cannot prove or disprove the doctrine, but it can help us to better understand the terms and the ideas involved, such as the idea of nothing. So, if the science side of things is of interest to you, this chapter is definitely worth reading. And here's another edited book. This one I would suggest just reading chapter 8. This chapter tries to defend creation from nothing on the grounds that it captures a concept of God that is more appealing than one that merely creates from pre-existing materials. And now here's a journal article, Why There Is Something Rather Than Nothing. And this article argues that there had to be something because it's impossible for there to have been nothing. And it looks at the subtraction argument and considers why it doesn't succeed in showing that there could have been nothing. The article also considers the psychological reasons why we might think we can have a conception of true nothing, even when we can't. It'll be useful to read this piece before attempting the task for this week. And then lastly, we have another article entitled Chaos Theology. And this article argues that creation from nothing should be rejected in favour of a creation from primordial chaos. And this for a number of philosophical, theological and scientific reasons. So that then is the reading list for this week. And our topic of the week was creation. And so that's it for Basement Philosophy. I'll see you next week for another instalment.